Welcome to Spotlight. The UK is marking the death of its longest reigning monarch. Queen Elizabeth II, who reigned for more than 70 years as Britain's monarch, has died at the age of 96, with her son Charles now succeeding her as king. In a statement, the Buckingham Palace has announced 10 days of mourning. The death of the British Queen has revived criticism of the monarchy system, as well as UK's legacy of colonialism. In this edition of the Spotlight, we'll discuss the position of the royal family in British politics and also delve into the legacy the British Queen has left behind. The guests we have for tonight's show are political analyst Shabbir Razvi, joining us from the British capital, London. And we also have journalist, author, and activist Fra Hughes joining us from Belfast. Well, gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let's start off with Mr. Razvi in London. What was the Queen's role in British politics? And in general, what is the monarch's role and the royal family's role in British politics? Is it strictly ceremonial, or is it a key role in the discussions and the direction of the country?
Hello, good evening. Of course, we are told that it's the constitutional monarchy here, and the Queen and whoever now Charles would become a ceremonial head of state. But the reality is somewhat different. Queen is the head of the state. Queen is head of the church. Queen appoints the Archbishop of Canterbury. Queen gives direction to the government, not in the legislative sense, but certainly very clearly she has an influence of what happens in politics here. And secondly, the Queen, for the last 24 hours and even a little bit earlier, there's been a whole sort of remorse, how wonderful the Queen was, how much good she did for Britain. Yeah, she may have, but she lived a life of a leisurely lady. The commentators, the royal correspondents in UK have been reporting that she had a busy schedule. She used to work, and service of the nation. When you're rich and wealthy, and the ordinary people in UK at this moment are finding it difficult even to keep warm, then it's very easy to sort of forget that she came from a very privileged background. Her ancestors and her herself, having been a monarch, as you pointed out, for the last 70 years, presided over the diminishing British Empire, but at the same time was able to instigate all kinds of crimes under her watch. Of course, one may recall that in 1952, when she was her coronation took place, a year later there was a coup d'etat in Iran in 1953. In the early 60s, there was a massacre of Mau sort of independent fighters, of nearly 500,000 in Kenya. There's a whole litany of crimes that have been committed under her watch. Sometimes people are saying here, oh, she was an old lady of 96 years old. She was a grandmother, a great-grandmother. It's not the time to talk about these things. I ask the question, when is the right time to talk about the legacy, the sort of blood-stained legacy of the British Empire? And it continues, even though there is not much of an empire left, but the interference, the murder, the killings that have taken place on this planet from the east to the west. So really, I think it's quite extraordinary. And the way it was nicely put by a Carnegie Mellon professor, Uju Anya, just before Queen was dead, 24 hours prior to it. And she said, I heard the chief monarch of a thieving, raping, genocidal empire is finally dying. May her pain be excruciating. And then she continues a day later, if anyone expects me to express anything but disdain for the monarch who supervised the government that sponsored the genocide, that massacred and displaced half of her family, and the consequences of which those living alive today are still trying to overcome.
Right.
You can keep wishing upon a star. So the reality is that there are many people on this planet who have experienced the atrocities committed by her government. It is said that she there were 15 prime ministers of this country under her monarchy, and each of those prime ministers was really part of the atrocities, as I said earlier, committed all over the world.
Let's bring in Mr. Fra Hughes into the discussion. Mr. Hughes, let's talk about the Queen's legacy. Now, she had her admirers, there's no doubt about that, but to many, she stands as a representation of an institution of colonialism, imperialism, invasions, displacements, exploitations, and wars, as mentioned by our guest in London. One example was the Australian Indigenous senator calling the Queen a colonizer while being sworn in at Parliament. Walk us through both sides of those viewpoints, if you will.
Okay, well, firstly, if we take the side of the monarch and the royalists, what we could say is that this lady presided 70 years as the head of state. She was someone that intergenerational groups of people could look up to, from grandparents to parents to grandchildren, that there was a continuity throughout those 70 years. While 15 prime ministers may have come and gone, the Queen was there as a steadying influence on British society. It could be claimed that she was there for guidance. Every Christmas Day, she is in the homes of tens of millions of British people who watch her as she reads out her government's speech for the forthcoming year, their policies for the next 12 months. You could also say that she was a moral compass for the country, and that she kind of encapsulated the values of loyalty and service and dedication. That would be values that would very much be seen to be British. So that's probably the story we hear about this, perfectly genteel old lady who just tried her best to serve the nation as best she could. Now, if we look at the other side of the coin, the monarchy is Queen Elizabeth II was a continuation of everyone before her. Now, I'm Irish. I live in Ireland. I can go back to Queen Victoria and the famines in Ireland of 1847 to 1852. Over 1 million people died and 1 million people emigrated. So we had a man-made famine in our country when there was enough food to feed the Irish people, which was taken out of the country and sold for profit. The Choctaw Indians raised money as another oppressed people and sent that money to help in famine relief in Ireland. And the Sultan of Turkey sent 3 ships to Ireland bringing food and aid and succour and solidarity to the people of Ireland, and Queen Victoria had those ships turned away and refused to allow the aid to come to the people on the island of Ireland. So her legacy is a prime example of how the monarchy and British imperialism go hand in glove. Would be the recent knighthood that was given to Tony Blair. Tony Blair joined the Privy Council, a very small elite group of people that are given access to and give advice to the Queen. He is seen by many to be a war criminal who's responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq and millions of people who were made refugees. So the British monarch rewarded a potential war criminal with the Knight of the Garter and invited him to become one of her closest advisors. And this is how the monarchy and the imperialist establishment of Britain continues to work together to exploit what's left of the Commonwealth to further destabilise sovereign nations like Syria, like the NATO attack on Libya, like the bombing of Yemen, and this latest proxy war through Ukraine against Russia is part of their task to balkanise Russia.
Shabbir Razvi, the new British Prime Minister Liz Truss is seen in a video from back in 1994 where she is saying the idea of the monarchy is quote unquote disgraceful. Is that a view shared by many in Britain? And that word disgraceful, is it because the monarchy is in a way a representation of elitism and racism?
Well, I'll come to the topic of elitism and racism in a minute, but I think it's interesting to note that Liz Truss, her first name is Elizabeth, and our Queen is also known as Elizabeth. And Liz Truss met her 24 hours before she died. So on the humorous side, if you like, maybe Liz Truss, when she spoke at the conference of the Liberal Democrats when she was 18, saying that the monarchy is an outdated sort of form of administration. Perhaps she was thinking when she was meeting the Queen was that, you know, this room ain't big enough for two Elizabeths, and within 24 hours, one Elizabeth is gone. So that's an interesting way of sort of looking at the wishful thinking of Liz Truss came through. But on the other hand, if you like, there is, of course, the whole idea of the British monarchy has been sold to the public here in such a incredibly wonderful way that people in sort of at the economic level have no sort of relationship with the manner in which the royals live and the ordinary people, but nonetheless they seem to support it because the PR, the marketing, the illusion that is created that how good the monarchy is, as our sort of guest from Northern Ireland was talking about. So what happens that even the minority communities living in UK, whether they're of Indian, Pakistani or other Commonwealth countries background, they've been lining up outside Buckingham Palace expressing their remorse at the demise of Queen Elizabeth. Perhaps a lot of the former colonies immigrants who are living in UK, they may be suffering from some kind of Stockholm syndrome that they don't realize that the pain that has been given to their ancestors, but at the same time, they're sort of in support of the Queen Elizabeth and the monarchy. And the sad pity is that some of the Muslim organizations in the UK and their leaders have been posting condolences on their websites in London and tweeting in support of the monarchy. So there is, as I said, this aura which has been created through the PR machine to portray the Queen as an upright, moral individual who was in service of her nation. Yes, may have been in service of her nation, but at the same time was part of the administration, part of her government, which was really incredibly, sort of created atrocities all over the world.
Fra Hughes, calls are growing louder in former colonies, for example, in the Caribbean, to remove the British monarch as their head of state. Some Commonwealth leaders have expressed unease about the passage of leadership from Elizabeth to Charles. Why do these countries still have to swear an oath to an unelected monarch when there's proper doubts about the role of a distant monarch in the world we live in today in the 21st century?
Yes, I think there's merely be two sides to this particular question to maybe focus on and to answer. The first one would be, I cannot understand. I know the people of Ireland fought nearly every generation to remove the military occupation of our country from British imperialism. That fight still goes on today, mainly politically, but there are people who still believe that people who are illegally occupying our country, that being the British imperialist forces, should be forced to leave and Ireland should become a sovereign nation. So there's no sovereign nation and there are no oppressed people in the world who were ever given their freedom by imperialists or monarchs who suddenly woke up one morning and said, do you know what, we've no moral, legal right to be in this country, so we're going to leave. So they have either been thrown out from the previous colonies through armed insurrection and national wars of liberation, or they have somehow been able to move on to a more political footing where they have continued their membership of the Commonwealth. Now, once upon a time, the Commonwealth might have been viewed as an economic bloc, the former constituent parts of the British Empire, which traded together. So there would have been trade between Britain and Australia, Britain and Canada, Britain and New Zealand, Britain and America, Britain and South Africa. Choose whichever one of the countries in the world, bar 22, that the British have colonised and militarily occupied. So I believe very strongly that people who were oppressed and colonised by British imperialism should break every connection with Britain. They should stand strong and stand up for themselves. And with the League of Nations throughout the world, they should stand tall and independent. And as you've said, in the modern world, as we move towards a multipolar world, Britain will have less and less influence on what is happening on the geopolitical kind of chessboard that is the world today. And I think previous Commonwealth countries should all become independent and all should have president-elect and their own parliaments and not have to swear fealty to a foreign oppressor in a different land halfway around the world.
Sure. Shabbir Razvi, let's talk about the royal scandals. Meghan Markle's accusations of racism behind the walls of Buckingham Palace. As we know, a former UK official has been quoted as saying the royal family members regularly indulge in routine racism. That's one of the scandals. Prince Andrew, the Queen's son, and the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Let's not forget about the death of Princess Diana, which, by account of many conspiracy theories, was pegged on the royal family itself. Has the royal family managed to hover above the law?
Well, certainly it looks very clear. The Queen rescued her son by paying, if I recall correctly, £15 million as hush-hush money in the Epstein sort of scandal when he was going to be prosecuted or potentially prosecuted in the USA. So, you know, rich mother helps her son to escape the full weight of the law. Yes, of course, the whole issue of Diana, and then multiple other scandals that have been part of the royal family. And this is where the interesting question arises. When the press here are saying that, you know, she brought some kind of morality and ethics to society, but really her family, her children were involved in all kinds of scandals. And not only that, you may recall that Prince Charles, now King Charles, was supposed to have taken £2 million from the Bin Laden family as a donation to one of his charities. And we don't know how many other kind of scandalous donations that were received by Prince Charles's charities in his previous life only as a prince. So there's a whole host of scandals. So it's very clear that the full weight of law is never sort of applied to the royal family. Ordinary people may have to go to prison if they are involved in any sort of sexual peccadillos or taking money from terrorist organizations. But the reality is that the royal family can get away with it because, as I said earlier, the whole weight of press and the media and the PR machine comes in, which tries to portray the royal family, the Queen particularly, as some kind of symbol of morality and ethics. And that's where the congruence, the contradiction occurs, whereby one cannot really understand how the general public does not rebel in this British Isles against the royal family and become a republic itself.
Fra Hughes, King Charles has been a polarizing figure with his fair share of scandals, as Mr. Razvi just mentioned, over the years. What are some of the challenges that he faces now, and what do you think will change for the UK and for the royal family, with Charles wearing the crown now?
Firstly, I'd say some of the challenges he's going to face are, firstly, his age. He's already in his 70s, and while the Queen might have had several decades to build a rapport with the British people, he's not going to have that. He's sometimes seen as quasi-eccentric, a bit of a kind of bumbling prat. For him to become the next head of the Church of England and become the next monarch, I think he'll struggle with his public persona. I don't think he has the same. I don't think he has the same personality. I don't think he has the same warmth that people may have imagined that the Queen had. I think that people will view him very much in the context and in the shadow of the death or murder of Princess Diana in Paris. There are theories that she was pregnant with Dodi Fayed's child, and that might have been part of the reason why someone might have not wanted her to continue with the pregnancy and live. And the fact that he may well have been having an extramarital affair for many, many, many years with Camilla Parker Bowles while he was actually still married to Princess Diana. So I think he's going to struggle in the role, and I think within the next 20 years we will see a breakup of the United Kingdom. So you will see Ireland reunified, you will see Scotland independent and possibly Wales. So you will have Charles as King of England and nothing else, and a diminishing Commonwealth. And I believe that there is a growing call that Britain should become a republic, and that this kind of anachronistic, old-fashioned monarchy, which many people believe is dripping with blood, it's maybe time to move on.
All right, gentlemen, that's all the time we have for tonight's show. Thanks to political analyst Shabbir Razvi joining us from the British capital, London, and thanks to journalist, author, and activist Fra Hughes speaking to us from Belfast. And, of course, a special thanks to you, our viewers, for staying with us on tonight's Spotlight. It's good night for now, and see you next time. Bye, everybody.